Imagine being trapped for eternity, chained to a mountain under an endless sky with no escape. A ferocious eagle descends, its claws tearing into your body. Every day your agony resets, every night the pain regenerates. This is the punishment of Prometheus. But what did he do to deserve this cruel fate? And could a glimmer of hope, freedom, be on the horizon? Before the story gently pulls you under, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if my content resonates with you. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where in the world are you and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe light a candle, and let's begin our adventure. High up in the Caucasus Mountains, there is no sound except the faint whistle of wind carving a path between the jagged peaks. The air is thin, sharp cold enough to numb even the smallest patch of exposed skin, though no frost claims the granite cliffs. Clouds drift sluggishly like pale spectres, rushing against the crags and disappearing into the vast blue expanse. The sky here feels infinite, too wide to comprehend, pressing down on the lonely figure chained at the mountain's edge. He is bound to stone, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of his chest, proof that he is alive, despite everything. Prometheus cannot feel the cold in any real sense anymore. No. The pain is far more immediate, far more intimate. His limbs are shackled, wrists and ankles chafed raw from iron cuffs that seem to grow tighter with every passing day. Or month or century, he has stopped trying to measure time in any meaningful way. The chains cut deep into his skin but never break bone, as though designed to keep him at the precipice of agony without allowing release. Every so often, the wind shifts just enough to snake beneath him, pulling hairs on his skin and carrying with it the scent of the mountaintop, dry, metallic, and too close to blood. It's funny if there's any humor left here, buried under his current condition. How silent the world is at this height. You might imagine it as peaceful, but the reality claws closer to being forgotten. Prometheus is like a dilapidated monument left to erode alone, steadily consumed by wind and sun while the world below turns on without him. Those chains beneath his ribs are far heavier than they should be, aggravated by the way his body slouches due to the rough footing on the rocks. His arms are stretched unnaturally, the weight pulling at his shoulders day after day until it feels like his own muscles will pull free from their sockets. Worse still are the wounds. There is never a reprieve from their rawness. His flesh never fully heals. It knits itself together more slowly than you'd think possible. Not out of kindness, but because Zeus wanted him to feel every break, every tear, every moment of being devoured. A light breeze rolls through now, kicking up loose pebbles beneath his bare feet. Those little scraps of movement might once have been enough to disturb his thoughts, but not anymore. He's long past jumping at shadows or feeling startled. The stillness here wraps around him, so thick it's almost tactile. It presses into his mind, forcing him to confront every ounce of what has brought him to this moment. He doesn't need the torment to feel his regrets. His solitude, after all, amplifies every whisper of doubt he might have had. Though, if you asked him, he'd still say it wasn't doubt. It never was. The sunlight today feels harsher than usual. It slants across his face in long, glaring sheets, and he twists his head instinctively to shield his eyes. It doesn't help much. Prometheus's skin is taut and raw in patches, parts of him roasted from days beneath the sun, while other scars reflect overlapping centuries of torment. For all the silence, there's an undeniable permanence to how deeply he's been marked by this punishment. The scars spiral outward from his torso as though trying to cover every inch of his once pristine form. His ribs are exposed in such detail that it seems unnatural. There's no denying that he is a relic of something once great, something defiant. And yet, what strikes most about this place is how utterly absent life feels. There are no birds here, other than that one cursed creature, and no insects or hardy mountain goats climbing the ridges. The wind is alive, yes, but it doesn't count. It carries no scent of forest, no whisper of valleys below. That empty stretch of sky above him speaks as loudly as a forgotten temple deep in the wilderness, the kind where gods are no longer prayed to, but whose ruins still remind you of what was lost. If Prometheus had any illusions about the price of rebellion, they were ripped from him long ago when his suffering truly began. His world narrowed, hour by hour, to the cold bite of iron, jagged stone, and the dull ache coursing through his body. It's not just physical, though. There's something deeply psychological about an eternity spent alone with your thoughts. Think about it. How long could you last, staring out into that endless sky, knowing there'd never be a voice, never a break in the solitude? The constellations keep moving. The sun rises and falls predictably. No god will check on him out of pity. No human can reach these solitary heights to bear witness. And that isolation, more than the cycle of pain, more than the weight of the chains, is the worst of it. It is, however, the perfect prison, not because it prevents escape, but because of its crushing finality. No one looks for a god in a place so desolate, and even if they did, what could they do? His torment is designed not only to punish, but to prove a point that even a titan, even one who once walked shoulder to shoulder with Zeus himself, could be silenced and set aside. The landscape reflects that intention. A jagged, skeletal place, endless in expanse and yet impossibly small. The sky stretches on forever, yes, but where's the use in that? Freedom is meaningless when your boundaries are set by chains not of steel, but of will. The sting in his wrists is faint compared to what's coming. He knows it, waits for it the way you might wait for a nightmare you can't avoid. And yet, even in this cursed routine, knowing what lies atop the mountain gives him purpose. That cursed bird, the eagle, has no aim but to deliver suffering, plunging its claws into the same fresh woven flesh, day after day. Prometheus prepares for the sound of its wings cutting through the air, snapping him out of whatever half-dream he'd begun to slip into. But even before the torment begins again, even now as he steels himself for the eagle's arrival, there is something strange in his quiet endurance. Something that's harder to see than the chains or even the monumental stillness of his punishment is the unspoken reason he remains upright. The most potent part of his captivity isn't Zeus's wrath, but his commitment. These chains, this endless torment, they are as much self-inflicted as they are divine. Would any mortal care, all these centuries later? Has humanity even realized they owe their ability to create, to destroy, to change the world, to him? It doesn't matter, though. If it was for them, and it was, then not even the weight of Olympus itself could make him regret it. He might be forgotten, but his effort won't be. Surely even Zeus must know that. Just as the sound of wings begins to stir across the silence, Prometheus tightens his grip on the memories buried deep within him. To mortals, fire means warmth, safety, even hope. But fire came with a price, and some prices are simply worth paying. What could be so essential, so transformative, that it was worth defying Zeus and risking eternal punishment? Fire. But not just fire as flame, not the crackle of dry branches or the glowing red embers you'd find at the edge of a hearth. No, to Prometheus, fire wasn't just about warmth or light. It wasn't even about survival. Fire was knowledge, fire was creation, fire was humanity's first step toward progress. Without it, there was only darkness, a world where mortals crouched in caves, blind and helpless, always at the mercy of forces they couldn't control. Prometheus had seen that world. He had walked among it. And that was exactly why he chose to act. Here's the thing about fire. It's a tool, right? And tools shift everything. The moment you give someone the ability to shape the world around them, to manipulate materials, to change their own reality, you've done something monumental. Fire marked that moment for humanity. It closed the gap between simply surviving and actually creating. And that's why it mattered. To humans, it meant the ability to cook their food, to take raw meat and grain and turn it into sustenance that could actually fuel them. It meant warmth they could control, a defense against the cold winters that had once swallowed their ancestors whole. It meant communities forming around hearths, people coming together not just to live near the fire, but to learn from it, to share ideas, to grow. And eventually, it meant tools. Metal melted and forged into shapes, weapons, instruments for farming, even art. But to the Olympian gods, fire wasn't just a tool. It was divine, sacred, untouchable. It belonged with the stars, not with mortals. And so, at Zeus's command, humans were kept in the dark, literally and figuratively. No sparks, no flame, no heat. It's not hard to understand Zeus's perspective. After all, fire was power. It gave an advantage, and once mortals had it, well, how long? Until their gaze rose upward toward Olympus itself. Zeus saw fire as a privilege of creation, bound to the gods alone. Mortals were supposed to stay humble, to scrape by, to thank the heavens for every crumb of grace they were given. That was the balance Zeus thought needed preserving. But Prometheus didn't see it that way. No, Prometheus had always been different from the rest of the Olympians. He had a fondness for humanity, for their hopeless attempts to make sense of the world. Their fragility didn't make him pity them. It fascinated him. He saw something in people that the gods didn't: potential. The gods were fixed, eternal beings, perfect in their immortality. They didn't grow or change, they simply were. But mortals? Mortals could learn. They could build, fail, and improve. Fire, then, wasn't just a gift to warm their bodies or light their way. It was the key to unlocking all of that, to unlocking them. Think about fire for a second. Controlling it was like having access to one of nature's most destructive forces, but bending it to your will. It didn't just keep predators at bay or make food edible. It transformed existence into something malleable. Ancient cultures saw fire as sacred because it wasn't just pragmatic, it was symbolic. It was a metaphor for advancement, for evolution itself. By stealing it, Prometheus wasn't defying the gods just to prove a point. He was igniting that metaphor in a very real, very tangible way. He was helping humanity cross a threshold that would otherwise have been impossible. And he didn't just sneak into Olympus and pocket a burning ember either. That version of the story, the kind you might have seen painted on amphoras or carved into stone, makes it seem deceptively simple. In truth, Prometheus risked everything. Zeus had already deprived humanity of fire as an act of deliberate control, and the act of stealing it wasn't just a heist, it was treason. When Prometheus carried fire down from Olympus, cleverly hiding the flame within a humble fennel stalk, he didn't do it for fame or glory. The gods already knew who he was. The mortals barely understood what a titan could be. No, he did it for humanity, for the simple belief that they deserved more than to live in the dark, that they could do something extraordinary if only given the tools. Fire returned to humanity, and so began everything. Think of it as the spark that set off an unending chain reaction. With fire, early humans didn't just survive, they thrived. Food was cooked, tools were made sharper, fashions of bronze and iron reshaped how societies functioned. Artisans molded clay into pottery with the fire's heat. Armies forged weapons to reshape entire landscapes and governments. Civilizations that had crouched in oblivion rose up, taking their first steps toward the towering temples, the sprawling cities, the innovation that we associate with the ancient world. And Prometheus saw all of this locked within them, dormant like a spark waiting for a gust of wind. But knowledge is dangerous, isn't it? That's probably what kept Zeus up at night, watching from Olympus, waiting for the day when humanity would catch the spark that Prometheus had started and let it roar into an inferno. It didn't take long for fire's double edge to make itself known. Weapons shaped from its heat-wrought devastation. The same tools that ploughed the earth could be turned into instruments of war. Fire damaged villages as often as it warmed them. The gods might have looked down with a bitter sense of irony, satisfied that their initial instincts were correct, that mortals were not ready for the power they'd been given. But to Prometheus, those consequences were inevitable, not regrettable. Risk and progress were linked, like the two sides of a coin. How could humanity become anything more if they never got the chance to take that leap to wield something so transformative that it reshaped their very existence? Prometheus wasn't blind to the dangers, and perhaps that's why his defiance cut so deeply. He knew what fire could bring. It wasn't just about the rosy glow of the hearth or the food cooked upon its flames. It was about the unpredictable chaos that came alongside it. It wasn't a gift of safety. It was the gamble of growth. Cultures around the world seemed to understand that gamble instinctively. Fire was sacred, yes, but it was also fearsome. Myths from Greece to India and beyond wrestled with this idea. Fire was something you honored, controlled, revered. And in its power lay its danger. A burning symbol of both humanity's creative potential and the devastation they could unleash. Even the modern world echoes this idea, with the Olympic torch, a direct homage to Prometheus, carried across continents as a reminder of the sacred fire that once sparked human progress. And yet, Zeus didn't care about any of this nuance. For him, Prometheus's theft of fire wasn't an act of foresight or compassion. It was sheer rebellion. It was a betrayal not only of his laws, but of the natural order he sought to preserve. When fire passed from the hands of gods to men, it broke open a divide, one that Zeus could never close again. With fire, humanity no longer depended on Olympus for warmth, for survival, for creation itself. They could shape their world for themselves. Zeus saw this as nothing short of blasphemy. As the story goes, Prometheus left Olympus not with a sense of triumph, but with resolve. He knew what was coming. He knew Zeus would strike back. But as he descended from the heavens with the fennel stalk burning in his hand, forging a path toward the human villages below, Prometheus believed in what he was doing. That flame wasn't just fire. It was a glimpse of what humanity could be. And Prometheus thought that was worth it. Worth the risks. Worth the price. Even worth eternity. But Zeus's response wasn't just an outburst of rage. It was a calculated strike. Prometheus wouldn't just suffer. He would serve as a warning. And it was all because of the fennel stalk that carried that flame down to earth. How do you outsmart the king of the gods and make it out alive? That's not the sort of thing you'd expect to go well, but Prometheus had made a habit of walking right at the edge of Zeus's patience. This time, though, it wasn't just cleverness or rebellion that gave him the nerve. It was humanity. Prometheus saw himself as their protector, their advocate, even as the gods dismissed mortals as small, fleeting things. So when the time came to make a choice, immortals or men, Prometheus didn't hesitate. The first real conflict between Prometheus and Zeus didn't start over fire. It started over sacrifice. In ancient Greece, sacrifice wasn't just about tossing an offering onto an altar and hoping the gods would smile on you. It was a transaction, a way for mortals to barter with the divine. You gave something valuable, food, wealth, or an animal, expecting the gods would grant you some favor in return. The Greeks believed this was how you maintained the balance between mortal and immortal. If you wanted the rains to fall or the crops to grow, you really didn't get to keep the best of what you had. That honor went to the gods. And, at least in theory, Zeus made sure it stayed that way. But Prometheus had other ideas. One day, he presented Zeus with a choice. An ox had been slaughtered for offering, and it was Prometheus himself who divided the portions. Now imagine this scene for a moment. Zeus, sitting on high, overflowing with thunderous pride, peering down at Prometheus's work. The Titan, calm but deliberate, arranges the pieces of the ox into two distinct piles. The first pile is dripping with fat, glistening in gold in the sunlight. On top, there's a neat layer of unblemished hide. Basically, it looks like something fit for a feast. But hidden beneath all that shine, nothing but bone. The second pile, though, is nowhere near as attractive. It's lumpy, ungainly, stuffed into the rough lining of the animal's stomach. But inside that unassuming sack, all of the meat, every choice cut. Prometheus must have known he was playing with fire here. Metaphorically, not literally, not yet. Zeus had an ego, and this wasn't just a gamble on which pile would look most appealing, it was a gamble on Zeus himself. Could the king of the gods see through a trick like this, or would his pride blind him? Prometheus's odds weren't great, but he carried on with confidence nonetheless, presenting the two piles and inviting Zeus to make his pick. Now, keep in mind, Zeus expected nothing less than total subservience from everyone around him. The idea that Prometheus would even think about deceiving him couldn't have crossed his mind. Maybe that's why he didn't hesitate. He looked over the two piles, took in the shimmer of the fat, the smooth perfection of that first heap, and declared his choice. Zeus reached for the glistening bones, pleased with himself for claiming what surely must have been the best portion. It wasn't until later, the exact moments unclear, that he realized the depth of the insult. By the time the deception hit him, it was too late to take back the mistake. The gods had committed to a system, one that would now decide what humanity owed them for eternity. What remained of the ox belonged to mortals, the flesh, the nourishment. From that moment on, sacrifices to Olympus would follow this pattern. Humans would burn bones and fat in honor of the gods while keeping what actually mattered, the food, for themselves. Prometheus had fundamentally shifted the balance between mortals and immortals. And Zeus? Well, Zeus was furious. But why take this risk in the first place? Didn't Prometheus know what he was setting himself up for? Of course he did. This wasn't impulsive or accidental. This was a statement, a deliberate reshaping of the relationship between gods and mortals. Prometheus couldn't stand how Zeus treated humanity, as though they were playthings without will or ability. The gods already kept mortals in the dark, literally, with no fire to light their way. They expected sacrifices as tribute, tokens of dependence, because that's how Olympus worked, mortals groveling, gods reigning. Prometheus saw the imbalance in this and decided to intervene. For Prometheus, this wasn't just a game of wits, though you could compare it to a masterful chess move. Despite Zeus holding all the power, Prometheus wasn't just baiting him for sport. This was a calculated rebellion. Each layer of fat placed over the bones was a silent declaration. Each piece of meat tucked away in the ox's stomach was a protest. He was saying, "You rule, but only because mortals allow it, and they deserve better than scraps." It's no wonder Prometheus became such a symbol of defiance over the centuries. This moment right here set the tone for everything to come. Culturally, the Greeks viewed sacrifice as a connection between worlds. Humans honored the gods by relinquishing what was precious, and in return, the gods provided rain, sun, victory in war, the essentials of life. Prometheus's sleight of hand disrupted that fundamental exchange. It wasn't just Zeus who got tricked. It was the entire order that had been carefully maintained since the dawn of time. The balance between mortal and immortal was no longer unshakable. In some ways, Prometheus might have proved here, with this subtle, almost quiet act of rebellion, that gods could be vulnerable to more than physical might. Pride, greed, those were all weaknesses too. Zeus's choice was influenced by vanity. And vanity is exactly what Prometheus exploited. What followed wasn't immediate chaos, though. Zeus didn't strike Prometheus down on the spot, or maybe he simply didn't think that was enough. This wasn't just about revenge. Zeus wanted to remind mortals, and anyone else who might be watching, that gods don't lose. The punishment had to be just as symbolic as the crime. Something lasting, something warped to leave an impression. First, Zeus sealed humanity's fate by taking away fire altogether. Their warmth, their light, their means of cooking. It wasn't just withdrawn, it was yanked out of their grasp in a bitter demonstration of divine power. Let them sit in the dark, he seemed to say. Let them remember what happens when gods are insulted. But Zeus wasn't finished. We don't often think about this part, but Prometheus's trick may have also planted the seeds of another punishment. When Prometheus warned humanity about Zeus's wrath, Zeus retaliated by sending Pandora, whose jar unleashed all the evils upon mortals. Disease, despair, untold miseries. That jar. Yes, jar. It was never a box. Wasn't about fire, technically, but there's no doubt it connected back to this moment, to the tension Prometheus stirred with his defiance. Pandora's arrival effectively introduced mortal suffering on a grander scale. It was a double-edged punishment. Humans lost fire, then gained everything worse. Still, by then, Zeus's focus had shifted back to Prometheus. He was patient in his anger, but entirely unforgiving. For now, though, Prometheus might have thought he had gotten away with it. The trick itself was a victory. It wasn't just clever, it was meaningful. These little moments don't always grab the spotlight in mythology, but this one stuck. It redefined sacrifice in ancient Greece, ensuring humans had a symbol of resilience every time they burned offerings. Those bones, wrapped in fat, became a reminder not just of Zeus's mistake, but of Prometheus's loyalty. That's the real key takeaway here. Prometheus wasn't just sly or bold or uniquely gifted with foresight. His actions weren't about showing off. They were about choosing humanity over divinity, knowing full well what that choice would cost him. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't lucky. It was a Titan's deliberate decision to say no to tyranny. Zeus could punish him, and oh, he absolutely would. But Prometheus could hold on to this moment as proof of one thing. The gods might rule, but even they could be challenged. But Zeus? Zeus never let a challenge go unanswered. And Prometheus, as clever as he was, surely knew what was coming next. Zeus's fury wasn't the kind to burn hot and quick. It wasn't an outburst or some reckless thunderbolt hurled in a moment of rage. No, anger like his unraveled slowly, deliberately, spreading like a storm that builds over the horizon until there's no ignoring it. That's what Prometheus had triggered. Zeus didn't just see a clever trick when he realized he'd been fooled with the sacrifice of fat-covered bones. It was a challenge to his rule. And as far as Zeus was concerned, challenges had to be crushed, ground into nothing, until no one would dare test his authority again. Prometheus wasn't going to escape unscathed. But Zeus, ever calculating, ever strategic, realized that punishing the Titan wasn't enough. Prometheus was the one who had ignited humanity's potential, who had dared to bring mortals into the gods' domain. For that, mortals also had to pay. They owed their suffering to him as much as their stolen fire, and Zeus, in his endless wisdom or hubris, depending on how you look at it, decided to strike both targets at once. He didn't just want to punish Prometheus. He wanted humanity to remember that their gifts came at the cost of a god's wrath. The first move was subtle in its cruelty. Zeus commanded Hephaestus, the divine smith, to craft something extraordinary, a woman. But this wasn't a blessing. This wasn't Aphrodite, born of sea foam and beauty. This was Pandora, a creation meant to tempt and ruin. Hephaestus sculpted her with care, making her as exquisite as any mortal had ever seen. Aphrodite gave her beauty. Hermes taught her the art of charm and deceit, and the Graces adorned her with jewels and garments to heighten her allure. But her beauty was the mask for something far more dangerous. Zeus gave her one unique thing: curiosity. A small grain of it, and just enough to spark disaster. When Pandora was ready, Zeus called her a gift and sent her to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. Now, Epimetheus wasn't exactly the sharpest of minds. His name even means afterthought, as if to hint that wisdom wasn't really his strong suit. Prometheus had warned him before to never accept anything from Zeus, no matter how appealing it might seem. But, of course, Epimetheus didn't listen. When Pandora arrived, bearing Zeus's so-called goodwill, Epimetheus welcomed her without a second thought. There's no record of hesitation, no pause in which he might have said, "Wait a minute, this feels like a trap." Zeus, after all, had perfected this little ruse. With Pandora came this jar. Yes, jar, not a box. The whole Pandora's box thing came later, mostly due to translation errors. The Greeks originally described it as a pithos, a large storage jar typically used for things like grain or wine. But remember Zeus's trademark cruelty. This jar wasn't filled with anything nourishing. Inside were the worst miseries the gods had ever imagined. Disease, despair, toil, old age, every hardship, every plague. One by one, these evils waited, packed tightly under the lid, ready to pour out into the world at the slightest mistake. And here's where Pandora's curiosity comes in. Whether Pandora opened the jar out of ignorance or was driven by Zeus's design is something the myths leave open for interpretation. What matters is that when she lifted the lid, even slightly, every horror spilled free. Just try to picture it. The jar, placed neatly beside her, cracks open, and suddenly the unseen floods out, the air thick with illnesses, the skies feeling heavier with sorrow. For humanity, life went from something difficult but manageable to relentless struggle. Crops withered, bodies fell ill, and suffering became an unavoidable part of mortal existence. Before Pandora realized what she'd done, it was too late. The jar had emptied, well, almost. One thing didn't escape in time, Hope. When she slammed the lid shut in her panic, Hope was trapped at the bottom, unable to follow the evils into the world. And maybe this is where Zeus's punishment becomes most fascinating. Imagine crafting a vengeance so meticulous that it not only destroys, but it also leaves room for survival. Hope isolated in that jar wasn't some oversight. Zeus left humanity just enough to keep them alive, to keep them struggling through lifetimes of work and heartbreak. Hope, in this sense, wasn't entirely a blessing, it was part of the punishment. It meant that no matter how hard life became, mortals would keep going. They'd persist, harnessing the fire Prometheus gave them, but carrying the weight of everything else Pandora released. While the jar's aftermath swept over humanity, Zeus was setting the stage for Prometheus's personal reckoning. The Titan didn't get a single moment to bask in what he'd accomplished or to regret it. No, Zeus's justice was immediate and brutal. Prometheus was seized and dragged to the Caucasus Mountains, a place deliberately chosen for its desolation. The region was as far removed from life as possible, its jagged peaks forming a barren backdrop. That's where Zeus gave the order that Prometheus would be chained. It wasn't enough that Prometheus be bound to the rock. Zeus wanted him humiliated, displayed like a cautionary tale carved into the very stone. Immortality meant the Titan couldn't die. But that was precisely the point. What Zeus devised wasn't just punishment, but a performance of power. Prometheus was forced to endure something far worse than a single death: eternity. Each day, an eagle, an emblem of Zeus himself, would descend from the sky. Its talons scraped against the rocks as it landed, its beak glinting in the sunlight before plunging into Prometheus's side. The eagle tore at his liver, eating chunks of it as Prometheus screamed against the empty sky. The pain was excruciating, but worse still was the regeneration. Every night, his liver would grow back, whole and unscarred, only for the cycle to begin again at dawn. Centuries passed in this hellish routine. Each day was timed to perfection, a torment on an eternal schedule. The eagle, a creature that, in Greek mythology, carried meanings of authority and divine retribution, was designed to remind Prometheus that he was entirely at Zeus's mercy. Even the elements participated in his punishment. The wind swept across the mountain without relief, chilling his wounds as they healed. The sun burned mercilessly, baking his skin under its glare, and yet there was no comfort in darkness. Nights were just an invitation for the dread to creep back in, cold and certain. Prometheus couldn't sleep, couldn't forget. He had no choice but to live through each moment, his only company, the vast, indifferent sky. Zeus didn't need to watch. He didn't need to check in. Prometheus's suffering wasn't about surveillance. It was about permanence. This wasn't the kind of punishment that was meant to end with an apology. It was a loud, unmistakable message. The gods could not be challenged. Mortals could not rise too high. And anyone who forgot these rules would face the consequences, no matter how clever, how noble, or how justified they believed themselves to be. But here's the thing. Prometheus knew this when he acted. He knew Zeus would lash out. He understood the risks, and still, he chose to give humanity fire. Maybe that's why the punishment doesn't feel like a victory for Zeus. Sure, Prometheus was broken in body, but his spirit, that part of him clung stubbornly to its purpose. He might have been silenced, but the fire hadn't been taken back. The damage, if Zeus saw it as such, was already done. Humanity had fire. They had the tools. And though the eagle would come again tomorrow, though Zeus's symbol of domination darted through the heavens each day to renew his agony, Prometheus held on to something unspoken. His suffering wasn't just a price. It had meaning. And so the mountain stood as both prison and monument, an eternal clash of will against might. Prometheus might have been chained, but his defiance burned as brightly as the fire he had stolen. Today, the eagle was circling closer, its shadow gliding silently over the rocky peaks. Prometheus braced himself, his mind thick with the memories of pain, and yet, somewhere beyond the haze of torment, there remained one simple truth. This was always worth it. Every day ends the same way it begins, with wings slicing the air. The eagle isn't rushed. It doesn't need to be. Its approach is almost ritualistic, unhurried, as if it revels in the inevitability of what's to come. High in the Caucasus Mountains, where even the wind moves with a kind of heavy reluctance, the eagle's shadow glides over jagged cliffs, its enormous wingspan catching the light like polished bronze. There's no mistaking its purpose. Zeus made sure of that, selecting this creature as the living extension of his will. The eagle isn't just an animal, it's a message. A constant, agonizing reminder that no one defies the gods without consequence. Prometheus knows the timing, not from any clock, but from the rhythm that centuries of torment have carved into him. The sun rises, the hours stretch with the unbearable weight of silence, and as the day tips past its midpoint, the shadow always arrives. First, there's the sound wings beating against the thin air, a low, rhythmic hum that grows louder until it's all he can hear. Then comes the unmistakable screech, sharp enough to cut through whatever faint thoughts he's managed to hold on to. He doesn't flinch anymore at the sound. There's no point. The eagle doesn't hesitate. It doesn't care. Its landing sends loose stones skittering across the narrow ledge, and in that instant, it is everything. It approaches with theatrical precision, talons scraping against the rock as it marches forward. The sun gleams off its golden feathers, and for a moment it looks almost beautiful. But that thought vanishes the moment its hooked beak strikes flesh. Prometheus's body jerks against the chains, his strained muscles twisting uselessly as the first talon digs deep into his side. The pain doesn't just bloom, it explodes. The eagle knows where to strike, it never misses. Zeus saw to that too, ensuring that Prometheus's liver would be the focus of his suffering. The creature tears into him with an unrelenting brutality, its beak vanishing into the ragged wound as it pulls, rips, and devours. You'd think pain like this, happening every day, would dull over time. Maybe the nerves would stop sending signals, or Prometheus's mind would eventually block it out. But no. Each moment is fresh, searing, unbearable. You wouldn't need to see it to know what's happening. The sound of it is enough. The wet tearing of flesh, the sickening crunch of tissue being shredded. Prometheus's screams echo across the mountains, swallowed by the wind before they can reach anyone who might care. Not that anyone can. No mortal could survive this climb, and even if they did, what then? Zeus's punishments aren't made to be interrupted. The eagle works methodically, its savage precision never faltering. Prometheus feels every inch of his body tighten and strain as the creature burrows deeper, searching out his liver. And when it finds it, when the beak hooks onto the edge of that sacred organ, the agony reaches a crescendo. His vision blurs, his chest heaves. His body wants to shut down, to escape into unconsciousness. But Zeus has made sure that escape is impossible. Life clings to Prometheus the same way these chains bind him. The leather is ripped free piece by piece until the eagle is satisfied. Blood drenches the rock beneath him, drying in the relentless sun. The smell of iron fills the air, warm and metallic. But the worst isn't the act itself. The worst is that it's never over. By the time night falls, Prometheus's body will heal itself. Slowly, agonizingly, the tissue will knit back together, the missing pieces regenerating just in time for the next day. His liver will return, whole and perfect, as though inviting the eagle to begin its work again. Prometheus doesn't know what's worse, enduring the pain as it happens, or waiting through the night, knowing it's coming again. There's no escape in sleep, because there's no sleep at all. Just endless hours staring up at the unfeeling sky, every second dragging him closer to the next attack. The cycle has no flaw, no break. It's like a clock with no pause, grinding forward in endless repetition. Tick. The eagle arrives. Tock. Flesh is torn. Tick. Night falls. Tock. He heals. Over and over, Prometheus's life is reduced to this rhythm of destruction and regeneration, pain and waiting. The monotony should be numbing, but it isn't. Each sunrise tightens the knot in his chest. Each shadow on the horizon sends a shiver through his mangled, scarred body. It's not just physical, it's psychological. Zeus designed it this way because he knew the eagle would do more than shred Prometheus's flesh. It would shred his spirit too. In Greek mythology, the eagle symbolizes divine retribution, a manifestation of Zeus's will and his absolute authority over the mortal and divine realms alike. Its role in Prometheus's punishment isn't random, not when the creature itself carries such deep significance. The eagle is the embodiment of Zeus's anger, swooping down from Olympus to remind Prometheus, in the most brutal way possible, of the price of rebellion. It's more than a bird. It's a walking, breathing extension of the king of gods. Every time its claws sink into Prometheus's sides, it's as if Zeus himself is there, watching, making sure the punishment continues without fail. And so it does, for centuries, maybe longer. Time blurs when the days are all the same, when the only thing breaking the silence is pain. Prometheus doesn't know how long he's been here. Or maybe he does, but it no longer matters. The seconds stretch like hours, the hours like years, and still he hangs in place, powerless to stop the cycle. Sometimes he tries to think about what's happening beyond the mountains, back among the mortals. Has fire made their lives better? Have they learned to wield its power wisely, or have they simply replaced one kind of struggle with another? He doesn't have answers. All he knows is that hope comes in small flashes, memories, distant thoughts, anything to distract him before the shadow returns. But the eagle's visits aren't just physical torture. They're reminders. Each strike of its beak says the same thing. This is what happens when you challenge Olympus. This is what happens when you betray your place. Zeus sent it as a symbol of his omnipotence, proof that even a titan, even one as proud and clever as Prometheus, could be broken. And day after day, it delivers that proof in blood and agony. The point isn't just to hurt Prometheus, it's to erase him, to reduce him to nothing more than the object of his own suffering. And yet, it doesn't entirely work. There's something stubborn in Prometheus, something even Zeus's punishments can't quite extinguish. Each time the eagle tears him apart, each time he heals and waits for the next attack, there's a flicker of defiance. A small part of him holds on to the choice he made, the fire he gave away, the humanity he called worth fighting for. That defiance is quiet, buried under layers of torment, but it's there. The eagle shreds his body daily, yes, but it can't touch the reason he's here in the first place. And that, perhaps, is the one thing Zeus couldn't control. Prometheus's punishment was supposed to be total, to obliterate him not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. But Prometheus clings to his defiance like a dying flame against a freezing wind. The chains hold him to the rock. The eagle devours him. The sun rises and falls over and over again. And yet something unspoken burns deep within the Titan's mind. He has no end to his suffering, no promise of reprieve, but his thoughts. The fragments of memories and meaning are his last rebellion. The eagle will return tomorrow, and the day after that, its shadow stretching across the mountain like clockwork. The pain will come, just as surely as the night will fall. But in those quiet hours between torment, Prometheus's mind still flickers with slivers of light. He has nothing left except his thoughts. But for now, that's enough. Somewhere deep inside, maybe even without realizing it, Prometheus clings to the promise of something more. Maybe freedom. Maybe someone who can shatter the chains. For now, though, all he has is the half-formed shapes of what might still be possible. And that, fragile as it is, keeps the flame alive. What would you hold on to, drifting through eternity? What single fragment of the past could carry you through unending days of pain? For Prometheus, memory is both his sanctuary and his torment. Chained in silence, he escapes only in flashes, quick, sharp bursts of what came before. They're not enough to dull the agony of the eagle or the weight of Zeus's punishment, but they are something. Something to break the hollow rhythm of his life carved into stone. His thoughts often drift to fire. Not the fire that burns under Zeus's sun, or the flickering light that dances in human homes now, thanks to him. No, it's the fire he forged. He remembers holding it for the first time in his hands, staring into that pulsing glow, realizing in that moment what it truly was. This wasn't just heat or energy. No, fire was life, distilled into a form you could control. It was the power to change, to shape the world. Prometheus had stolen that power from the gods, stolen it from Zeus to give it as a gift to the mortals who had nothing. And yet, as the eagle's claws scrape against his ribs, he wonders if any of them even remember where that fire came from. or the price it cost him. In these stolen moments of memory, Prometheus can almost feel the fennel stalk in his hands again, its texture rough, brittle but light enough to conceal the ember he carried down from Olympus. He'd hidden it like treasure, shielding humanity's hope from the jealous eyes of Zeus. He remembers the look on their faces, those fragile beings staring up at him as he revealed the spark. Their fear gave way to awe, and awe blossomed into joy. He sees their faces in flashes now, flickering like shadows on the edge of his consciousness. There were no words strong enough to describe the transformation. It wasn't about gratitude. It was about possibility. The spark meant something new, something sacred. And yet, not all his memories are bright. Sometimes his thoughts are haunted by the arguments with Zeus. Those moments before it all spun out of control, before the chains, before the eagle, before the fire. He'd stood opposite the king of the gods himself, defiant. Zeus had wanted humanity to remain small, weak, dependent on Olympus for everything. He had smirked at Prometheus, mocking the Titan's fondness for mortals as though it were some naive flaw. "They are fleeting," Zeus had said dismissively, "specks in the wind bound to nothing." But Prometheus had seen something different. He'd seen mortals stumble, yes, but he'd seen them rise again. He'd seen them survive without strength, live without power, endure without favor. That endurance fascinated him. How could Zeus not see it? Zeus's thunderous roar still echoes in his memory, especially when Prometheus had stood his ground. The Titan hadn't begged, hadn't supplicated, he'd argued. His words burned hotter than any flame he'd brought to earth. They may be fleeting, but they grow. They change. They're not static like Olympus's ivory walls, they are becoming. Zeus had laughed at that word as if it was some sort of child's dream, a concept unworthy of the divine order. And yet, Prometheus couldn't unsee what he had seen. Humanity's spark wasn't just weak, it was waiting. Waiting for fire, waiting for knowledge, waiting to be more. And then there was Mycenae, the sacrifice that started it all. Another jagged shard of memory he can't shake. He pictures the ox, the 2 piles of sacrifice he crafted with such care. His hands are deliberate as he arranges silky fat over bleached bones in one heap and shoves the good, nourishing meat into a second. He'd known Zeus's vanity would make him choose the glittering surface. And when it did, leaving humanity with the real sustenance, Prometheus's chest had swelled with a quiet pride. But now, chained to this rock, bleeding into the mountain every day, he wonders if even that small victory was worth it. Did that choice, one so clever and calculated, doom him from the beginning? He'll never know, not truly. Zeus's throne casts such a long shadow. And then there's Pandora. This memory sticks to him like ash, a reminder of how Zeus's wrath spilled over onto those he tried to protect. Pandora wasn't just Zeus's revenge on humanity for receiving fire. She was a weapon crafted to unravel all the progress Prometheus had fought to give them. He pictures Epimetheus, his brother, naive and gullible, welcoming her with open arms despite Prometheus's warnings. There was always something tragic about Pandora's existence, crafted to be lovely enough to tempt, curious enough to ruin. The jar she carried, Prometheus sometimes tries not to think about it. What did that moment look like, right before she opened it? Did she hesitate? Was there any warning that lifting the lid would condemn humanity to plagues, despair, and untold suffering? His mind clings to flashes of that jar, its smooth surface hiding horrors unimaginable. But he always pushes the memory aside before it lingers too long. These memories of fire, of humanity's potential, of the bitter consequences of rebellion, come to him like sparks in the dark. They are bright, intense, but they fade just as quickly, leaving behind the cold, heavy reality of his chains. Prometheus would give anything to hold on to these thoughts longer, but they are fleeting, just like the mortals he sacrificed everything for. He sees them in glimpses, small moments frozen in time. A mortal child laughing around a fire, families gathered for warmth, that first crude tool forged in glowing embers. He remembers what it felt like to walk through villages among them, to hear their unrestrained laughter, raw and unpolished but alive in a way the halls of Olympus never were. It's the contrast that cuts the deepest. In mythology, memory often serves as a cruel mirror. It shows what was and forces you to compare it to what is. Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound captures this better than anything. Prometheus isn't just punished physically, he's tortured by what he knows. He taught mortals not just fire, but writing and agriculture, medicine and science, the tools of civilization itself. All of those victories replay in his mind now, but they feel distant, like watching someone else's life. It's why these glimpses, these small sparks, aren't just comforting, they're agonizing. They remind him not just of his sacrifice, but of everything he's lost. He doesn't let himself think too long on the Titanomachy. The war against the Titans, his own kin, feels like an entirely different life. He remembers standing with Zeus then, helping the Olympians secure their power. Back then, there had been no chains, no punishments, only triumph. Zeus, like Prometheus, was once a rebel, overthrowing Cronus to shape the world anew. Prometheus wonders now if that irony strikes Zeus the way it does him. Did Zeus feel betrayed when Prometheus sided with mortals? Was it betrayal, or did Zeus simply see it as defiance worthy of punishment? The answers don't really matter, not anymore. But amidst all this, the triumphs, the betrayals, the fleeting memories of joy, there is one thing Prometheus clings to most. He doesn't know why he remembers it so vividly, but he does. It's the way fire felt in his hands, the weight of it, not heavy but electric. That warmth pressing against his palms, not burning but alive. If he lets himself, he can almost feel it again, pulsing, a reminder of why he did it all. It's that sensation that keeps him going. The proof that fire wasn't just an act of rebellion, but an act of hope. Fire was all he could give humanity, and even now, after centuries of pain, he doesn't regret it. Not entirely, not even mostly. These memories aren't freedom, not really. They're more like glowing embers, small and faint, their light weak against the consuming dark, yet still there. They give him just enough to hold on. Each flash is a reminder that Prometheus wasn't always bound, wasn't always alone. Once, he had walked freely. He had chosen his path knowing all that it entailed. Zeus could set his eagle upon him, chain him to these barren heights, tear into his flesh daily, but these sparks of memory, those belong to Prometheus alone. And that's what keeps the fire alive, no matter how small it burns. Because even in the darkest stretches of agony, even as the eagle circles closer, he remembers this: the choice was his. And if he had to do it all again, he knows, deep down, he would. Hope is a strange thing, isn't it? It doesn't fill your hands. It doesn't give you answers. And for Prometheus, chained and bleeding, waiting under an endless stretch of sky, it's little more than a whisper. But it's there, quiet and stubborn, clinging to the edges of his mind even as the weight of eternity drags him down. Day after day, night after night, as his wounds heal and fresh ones are carved anew, that whisper keeps him turning his thoughts towards something fragile, something uncertain, the possibility of freedom. He doesn't know when it will happen, or even if it's possible anymore. But his mind conjures the faint image of a hero. Someone extraordinary. Not a god, but a mortal. One born not of divine privilege, but from the fires of human struggle. Someone called Heracles. It's not a name he chants aloud, it's more of a quiet prayer spoken to no one but the wind. Heracles, son of Zeus and a mortal woman, isn't like the Olympians who sit on their thrones and watch from afar. He's walked among mortals, faced their pains, endured their challenges. He's fought monsters, carried burdens that would crush lesser beings. If there's anyone who could shatter these chains, it might just be him. But will he come? That's the real question, isn't it? Prometheus has no idea what the future holds. He doesn't know that Heracles will one day make his way to these peaks, scaling the frozen cliffs in search of something altogether different. A golden apple, a prize for one of his 12 labors. For Prometheus, it's only a thin thread, dangling just out of reach. Heracles could arrive tomorrow, or centuries from now, or perhaps he won't come at all. Zeus certainly hasn't made any promises or concessions, and the idea that a mere mortal could outmatch the will of the king of the gods seems laughable. Yet the whisper remains. Small, steady, persistent. Think of it like a single star in an endless night sky, a pinprick of light barely visible against the vast backdrop of darkness. If you stared at it too long, you'd swear it wasn't even there. But it's enough to guide Prometheus's thoughts away from the pain, away from the endless cycle of the eagle's attacks and his body knitting itself back together. That faint flicker of hope lets him imagine that these chains, as unbreakable as they seem, might not last forever. The mountain might not always be his prison. The eagle might not always circle above. Heracles' name isn't tied to certainty, but it's tied to possibility, and for now, that's the most powerful lifeline Prometheus has. Heracles' role in myth, as you might already know, is filled with acts of extraordinary heroism. This isn't the guy who settles for simple victories. No, Heracles defies expectation at every turn. He's the kind of mortal who faces impossible challenges and makes them look not easy, because nothing about his labors is easy, but manageable. Slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the Erymanthian boar, holding up the sky for Atlas. These are tasks that should break anyone, tasks meant to destroy him. And yet, Heracles persists. Maybe it's stubbornness, maybe it's strength, or maybe it's just sheer willpower, the kind Prometheus saw in humanity all those centuries ago when he decided to defy Zeus and deliver fire. He's not just a hero in the classic sense. Heracles is proof of what mortals can become when they refuse to quit. Prometheus doesn't know many details about Heracles' life. How could he? The sky doesn't carry news to his lonely mountaintop. But there are whispers through time, small details he might have gleaned before his punishment began. Stories of Heracles' lineage reach him in fragments, tales of the mortal-born son of Zeus who struggles under the weight of both divine favor and divine spite. Humanity admires him, but Olympus watches him carefully, unsure whether to celebrate him or fear him. That's the thing about Heracles. He exists in both worlds, never fully belonging to either. Maybe that's why Prometheus holds him in his thoughts. Mortals live short, fragile lives, but their struggles are raw, real. Gods like Zeus live forever, but eternity dulls their edges. Heracles, though? He's different. He bridges the gap. And according to the way these myths unfold, one day Heracles will find his way to the Caucasus Mountains. Not for Prometheus. Heracles isn't planning a rescue mission, but for the apples of the Hesperides, golden fruits that sparkle with the light of immortality. It's no coincidence that this labor brings him here. It's a reminder of how stories intertwine, how even the seemingly random paths of gods, mortals, and titans often cross in ways no one expects. When Heracles sees Prometheus bound to the mountain, witnessing firsthand the crushing weight of Zeus's wrath, something stirs within him. Call it pity, call it defiance, call it instinct. Heracles doesn't walk away. Instead, he does the unthinkable. He challenges the cycle. The eagle, as swift and relentless as it is, doesn't stand a chance against Heracles. Like every other beast the hero has faced, it falls to his might. With his bow drawn, Heracles strikes with precision, an arrow piercing the creature that has haunted Prometheus for centuries. The eagle doesn't rise again. It lies broken on the rocks, its wings splayed, its beak forever silenced. And in that single moment, the unbearable rhythm of Prometheus's suffering finally stops. Just imagine what that must feel like. For the first time in what feels like infinite days, there's no shadow circling, no talons slicing through his side, no sharp beak tearing at his flesh. Silence falls over the mountaintop, and it feels as if time itself is holding its breath. But Heracles doesn't stop there. His intervention goes beyond stopping the eagle. He breaks the chains. Somehow, whether through strength, wit, or bargaining with the gods, he does what Prometheus has thought impossible for so long. He tears open the bonds that have held the Titan in place for centuries, releasing him from the jagged stone. It doesn't undo the centuries of agony, but it ends them. Prometheus is free. And here's the strangest part: Zeus allows it. It's hard to picture the king of the gods signing off on an act like this, isn't it? But that's what happens. Maybe Zeus sees Heracles' actions as a reflection of his own strength. After all, Heracles is his son. Or maybe Zeus respects the hero's defiance, even if it mirrors Prometheus's rebellion in some ways. The myths don't give us a clean explanation, but the result is clear. Prometheus walks away from his punishment, alive, his suffering finally over. The eagle lies dead. The mountain, for the first time in centuries, sits empty. Prometheus doesn't know any of this yet, of course. He doesn't know if Heracles will come or if Zeus will truly allow it. All he knows is the faint flicker of hope that keeps him holding on through the darkest stretches of eternity. Hope fuels his thoughts, small and fragile as they are, reminding him why he did what he did. That fire in the fennel stalk, the faces of the mortals he once walked among, the quiet belief that this suffering wasn't meaningless. It's that belief, that hope, that fuels him now. Even in agony, even in silence, he waits. For now, Prometheus lets this possibility settle in his mind, not like a roaring fire or a flood of certainty, but like a whisper. Simple, steady, and just enough to hold on to. Heracles might come. He might not. But that faint star in the endless night sky, it's still burning. That's all Prometheus needs. Fire changed everything. In an instant, it transformed humanity from helpless wanderers into something more. Creators, thinkers, builders of a future they likely couldn't even imagine. But here's the real question. Were they ever ready for it? When Prometheus carried that first flicker of flame from the heavens to the earth, he brought with it the promise of progress. That much is obvious. What's less obvious, and what Zeus might call bittersweet vindication, is all the destruction it delivered in tandem. Fire gave humanity the power to evolve, to survive. But it also gave them the power to destroy themselves. Think about it for a second. The warmth of fire might protect a family huddled against a cold winter night. But it doesn't take much for that same flame to leap from the hearth and devour an entire village. And isn't that what fire has always been? A double-edged sword with no handle, just blade. On one side, fire represents creativity and progress. The ability to learn, grow, and shape the world in ways that animals and even gods never could. On the other side, it's destruction. It's the burned-out fields, the smouldering ruins, the endless smoke rising into the sky. With fire, humanity gained mastery over nature, but they also gained something far more dangerous, mastery over each other. Prometheus knew what he was doing. You don't defy the gods, steal part of their power, and suffer eternal torment for the sake of a lukewarm decision. He believed in humanity's potential to wield fire responsibly, to use it as a tool for progress, to survive and thrive where they once cowered in the darkness. And they did. They built civilizations with it. Aeschylus describes this vividly in Prometheus Bound, crediting fire with everything from the metal tools we forged, to the structures we built, to how we shaped medicine, agriculture, and art. The spark gave birth to pottery hardened in kilns, iron melted and hammered into swords and plows, even the ability to picture the stars above. With fire, humanity wasn't just surviving, they were inventing everything that made life more than the sum of its needs. But fire doesn't have a conscience. It doesn't decide how it's used. That's left to the people holding it, and history has made it painfully clear what that means. Early humans used fire to burn forests to the ground for farmland, carving their survival out of ecosystems that had thrived for millennia without them. Fire became a weapon almost as quickly as it became a tool. How long after humanity melted its first metals for tools did they turn around and make blades for war? Prometheus may have seen humanity's potential, but did he see the axe raised in one hand as the bread was baked with the other? Zeus might argue, for all his cruelty, that he saw this contradiction far more clearly. Fire wasn't just the gift that allowed humanity to grow. It was the seed of their entire capacity for violence. Without fire, civilizations might never have been built, but it didn't take long for them to turn those flames back on themselves. The same glowing coals that provided warmth and light also tempered blades and built siege engines. Empires rose and fell on the strength of their forges. It's hard to celebrate the invention of the first furnace without remembering every battlefield it quietly birthed. In a way, humanity didn't just inherit fire from Prometheus. They became fire, unpredictable forces capable of both creating and consuming everything in their path. But Zeus's response to fire wasn't just about this duality. It was about control. He wanted what fire represented, the raw potential of knowledge, to stay in the hands of the gods, locked far out of mortal reach. And when Prometheus defied him, he didn't just punish the Titan for the theft. He crafted a second punishment, one aimed squarely at humanity, and it wasn't subtle. The myth of Pandora demonstrates exactly this point. Rooted in Hesiod's accounts, Pandora wasn't just a gift sent to humanity, she was a ticking clock. Her curiosity mirrored the same tension Prometheus created by giving humanity free will through fire. When Pandora opened her jar, every evil imaginable spilled out into the mortal world: disease, toil, death. Fire granted humans the ability to survive those struggles with innovation, but it didn't erase the struggles themselves. It might have even multiplied them. Prometheus's gift wasn't just power, it was a gamble, and that gamble still echoes every time fire shapes the world, for better or worse. Take the Industrial Revolution. Humanity unraveled the mysteries of combustion. And what happened? At first, progress seemed unstoppable. Engines sparked to life, factories erupted across the globe, and technology leapt forward at an impossible pace. But alongside all that growth came smoke-clogged skies, dangerous labor, and weapons of war more destructive than ever. Fire surged through the veins of human history, spreading both brilliance and destruction in equal measure. And Prometheus's act. It continues to play out every time fire roars its way into our narrative. Even the myths themselves seem to wrestle with this question. In many ancient traditions, moments of great discovery also bring great danger. Knowledge, as often shown in mythology, is sacred but perilous, belonging to those with wisdom to wield it. Prometheus didn't only steal fire. He handed mortality something meant for gods, something entwined with divine ambition. Zeus's rage may have been cruel, but it reflects something fundamental about how progress is perceived, powerful, but never easy, and always costly. Fire wasn't simply a gift, it was a test. What's fascinating is that we're still grappling with the same issues Prometheus brought to life. The ethical questions of progress haven't disappeared, they've just shifted. You could argue that the spark of fire planted the seeds for every major moral debate humanity would eventually face. Should we harness these tools for creation or destruction, for order or chaos? And more importantly, can we draw the line when power grows too great for us to control? The energy that roars in nuclear reactors today isn't so different from the fire that first crackled in Prometheus's hands. Humanity took his flame, expanded it, multiplied it 1,000-fold, and still hasn't fully decided how to use it. In that way, Prometheus's gamble remains unresolved. Was it worth it? That's the ultimate question, isn't it? Zeus would probably say no. In his eyes, Prometheus unbalanced the natural order. Mortals were supposed to scrape by under the gods' protection, flourishing only in ways Zeus deemed appropriate. Humanity wasn't meant to rise up or carve their fate out of the stone. And yet, Prometheus's act argues the opposite. Fire wasn't an accident. It wasn't stolen out of malice or mischief. It was stolen out of belief. A belief in the possibility of humanity forging something better, of moving beyond the humble caves and into something closer to the divine. Looking at history, it's impossible to separate progress from destruction. The two march together, inseparable and intertwined every single time. Prometheus's fire didn't just build societies, it's in every problem humanity wrestles with today. Was he right in trusting us with it? Or was Zeus right in thinking we'd misuse it? You might think there's no real answer to that, and maybe there isn't. But what's undeniable is that Prometheus didn't just bet on our ability to survive. He bet on our ability to overcome. That's something fire always reflects back at us, for better or worse. And yet, progress continues, doesn't it? It doesn't ask permission, it simply spreads, one spark lighting the next. Prometheus gambled everything on the idea that humanity's best instincts could triumph over their worst, that knowledge would ultimately outpace destruction. And though Zeus punished him, bound him to the mountains, and sent his eagle to torment him, he never undid Prometheus's act. The fire remains. It still burns today, in every invention, every idea, every moment where humanity steps forward into the unknown. So maybe the better question isn't whether fire was worth it, it's whether we are. Whether we've justified the price Prometheus paid. The same fire that saved us could still destroy us. And yet, people keep creating, keep shaping, keep moving forward, as if answering Prometheus's whispered hope that his suffering wasn't in vain. The gamble he made, the one that burns through time, has never truly ended. And the only way humanity can honor it is to keep walking that knife's edge, balancing creation with restraint, trying to make sure the fire doesn't consume us. That's the real price of progress. A story Prometheus began, and one we're still writing. What do we take from the story of a titan bound to a mountain, suffering endlessly while mortals carry on below? It's a myth so ancient that its edges have probably worn smooth over time, but its heart remains sharp. Prometheus's story isn't just one of punishment. It's about sacrifice, defiance, and a version of hope that rises out of the ashes of despair. More importantly, it's about the price of progress. How we've paid it, how we're still paying it, and why we might always be paying it. There's a strange tension in his legacy. On one side, you have the suffering, the chains, the eagle, the unimaginable agony. On the other, you have the fire, the spark he gave humanity, the foundation for everything we've become. Pause and think about that for a moment. Everything you see around you, the tools you use, the ideas that build societies, even this very video, is fueled by Prometheus's original act of rebellion. If you were to strip it all back and snuff out that single ember he carried down from Olympus, what would be left? Darkness, cold, and silence. And yet, for all the progress we've made because of him, what did Prometheus get in return? Centuries of torment on a desolate mountainside. A perfect contrast, don't you think? The Greeks loved symmetry in their myths, but this one isn't neat or comforting. And that's probably why it sticks. Prometheus challenges us to think about what we really inherit when we receive a gift of such magnitude. In a sense, what he gave us isn't just fire, it's responsibility. He handed us a torch, one that's been carried through centuries, passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. But like any torch, it can either guide us forward or burn us alive, depending on how we hold it. Throughout history, writers, artists, and philosophers have wrestled with this legacy, trying to make sense of it, reinterpret it, and sometimes even claim it for themselves. The Romantic poets saw Prometheus as far more than a figure in chains. Percy Bysshe Shelley, for example, reimagined the myth in Prometheus, unbound, turning the Titan into a symbol for human intellect and resistance against oppression. It's no coincidence that this was written during a time when revolutions were shaking the foundations of old regimes. For Shelley and other romantics like Byron, Prometheus wasn't just a mythological figure, he was a banner. His defiance against Zeus became a rallying cry for anyone standing up to tyranny. The story didn't just stay in poetry, though. Prometheus found his way into science, philosophy, and even pop culture. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, is perhaps the most famous reinterpretation of the myth. Dr. Victor Frankenstein, like the Titan, dares to tamper with forces beyond human understanding. He steals the fire of creation, bringing life to a creature that the world isn't ready to accept. What follows, of course, is a spiral of unintended consequences, a commentary not unlike the original Promethean dilemma. Can progress, scientific, intellectual, or otherwise, ever come without destruction? Mary Shelley's novel doesn't answer that question, and neither does the myth itself. But it asks it in a way we haven't stopped exploring since. Even beyond literature, Prometheus's name has become shorthand for rebellion, innovation, and sometimes the tragic consequences of both. Franz Kafka, never one to shy away from existential dread, wrote a short story simply titled Prometheus, where the meaning of the Titan's suffering becomes ambiguous and unsolvable as time wears on. The gods forget why they punished him. The eagle loses interest. The rock remains cold and indifferent. It's an interpretation drained of the triumph you find in Shelley's work, but it feels no less relevant. especially in a world often consumed by cycles of conflict and apathy. Prometheus has even crept into the language of science. The artificial element promethium, discovered in the 20th century, bears his name, highlighting the connection between the myth and human curiosity about the natural world. The same is true for NASA's Project Prometheus, which sought to develop nuclear-powered spacecraft capable of exploring the farthest reaches of space. These projects remind us that the drive to understand, to explore, and to push beyond boundaries isn't just some abstract idea, it's tangible. It's something humanity has turned into action time and time again, no matter the risks or the cost. In art, too, the image of Prometheus hasn't faded. José Clemente Orozco's mural of the Titan at Pomona College portrays him as a defiant, muscular figure engulfed in flames, a stark reminder of both his suffering and his strength. Similarly, the bronze statue of Prometheus at Rockefeller Center looms over a massive fountain, lit from beneath like a beacon. These images aren't subtle. They demand attention, just as Prometheus himself demanded attention from Zeus when he dared to challenge the natural order by delivering fire to mortals. What's fascinating is how this myth continues to inspire. Prometheus has become the archetype of the rebel, the creator, the one who carries the consequences of progress so others don't have to. You see traces of him in the stories we tell about real people, innovators who make breakthroughs, often at great personal cost. The biography, American Prometheus, draws a direct line between him and J. Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist behind the atomic bomb. Like the Titan, Oppenheimer harnessed a power that forever changed the world, though not without creating consequences that haunted him for the rest of his life. Prometheus doesn't exactly lose relevance. Instead, he adapts. Ayn Rand invoked his name repeatedly in her work, positioning him as an allegory for individualism and resistance to societal limits. In The Fountainhead, Anthem, and Atlas Shrugged, Rand crafted Promethean figures, those who dared to create, to challenge, to defy conformity, regardless of what society thought of them. Her interpretation splits Prometheus away from suffering and leans into the heroism of sacrifice. Whether or not you agree with Rand's philosophy, her use of the myth is a potent example of how deeply its themes resonate across time. And here's something unusual. Not every reinterpretation keeps that defiant spark alive. In Kafka's version, Prometheus's suffering isn't triumphant or meaningful. It's simply exists. There's no redemption arc, no hero swooping in to save him. Instead, the myth becomes a meditation on the weight of endurance, a picture of what it means to exist without an end in sight. The rock looms larger than the fire, as the symbols of suffering overshadow those of creation. But whether Prometheus is cast as hero, martyr, or victim, his central choice, the choice to give humanity fire, remains the heart of the myth. It threads through every modern retelling, every reinterpretation, every piece of art or literature or philosophy that invokes his name. Prometheus didn't give humanity an easy gift. Fire isn't a blanket or a loaf of bread, it's a tool, a dangerous, unpredictable one. It requires vigilance and thought, and as we've seen over the centuries, it comes with the twin risks of creation and destruction. That risk, the gamble, is exactly what makes Prometheus's defiance so powerful. It's also why his story doesn't fade, not completely. It lingers in our language, our culture, and our understanding of what it means to embrace progress. We keep carrying his torch, whether we realize it or not. In every leap of innovation, every revolution of thought, his flame flickers. And while Zeus's punishment intended to make Prometheus an example of what happens when you defy the divine, the legacy that remains is something different entirely. Each painful moment he endured became a quiet but unrelenting message. Progress doesn't come without cost, but it always carries hope. Prometheus's story isn't just about the past. It's about us now. Every person who picks up a tool, builds something new, or questions a boundary is connected to that Titan on the mountain. His story reminds us that we're always balancing on the edge of creation and destruction, always grappling with the costs of what we dare to achieve. And that, maybe more than anything, is what makes him so timeless. The flames he ignited are still burning. What we do with them, That's the question we're still trying to answer. Prometheus's story sticks with you, doesn't it? Maybe that's because it reminds us progress always has a cost. He gave humanity fire, knowing it would bring both creation and destruction. Yet, even as Zeus punished him, Prometheus held on to hope. What he suffered wasn't meaningless. It was a gamble on humanity's potential. Here's something to think about. Look around at everything fire has shaped, for better or worse. From ancient tools to modern technology, his gift still burns. So, what would you sacrifice for a better future? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this.